replay of ManageForce's webinar on UX1. If you have any questions or would like to schedule some time with us, please email us at info@manageforce.com. In terms of our objectives for today, I'd like to give you a clear picture regarding what UX1 is all about, and this means seeing it firsthand for yourself. This also includes seeing some of the features like personal forms, which aren't necessarily part of UX1, but are part of the 9.2.1 tools release. Now, when Oracle performs these demonstrations on UX1, they typically show you just the end result and maybe a few steps on how to override some of the content. But for some of these features, I want to try and show you how to generate the content from scratch so you can see how easy or difficult it is to use. And furthermore, I'll want to mention some considerations along the way, such as impacts to the upgrade process, security and licensing, and overall management of content. This is how Oracle describes UX1, and I'll give you a moment to read it for yourself here. But for when you read this statement here, it's hard to visualize what UX1 really is. And in every article or press release, they'll use these buzzwords like innovative, transforming, or empowering. But what does this really translate into? If you were to ask me what UX1 is in its simplest terms, I would say that UX1 is a concept about improving the user experience using composed pages that follow this alert, analyze, and act paradigm through a role-based approach. And UX1 comes with currently 50 pre-delivered roles and their related user-defined object content like queries, E1 pages, and Cafe 1 objects. I've got the full list of pre-delivered roles in the appendix section of this presentation. But without this alert, analyze, act concept and the pre-delivered content with the roles, Oracle wouldn't really be able to sell this concept of UX1. It would just be another set of tools release features. You also hear this term about citizen developers, who are generally the super users or BAs who can leverage all these personalization features to configure solutions that support business processes and users. It's the concept is really about better utilizing your business analysts to configure these solutions as opposed to using your more limited programmer resources. This next slide here illustrates that main part of UX1, which is a sample of the composed page with pre-delivered user-defined objects in that alert, analyze, and act format. And Oracle will call these composed pages as landing pages, which I will talk a little more about that later. And this example here is just one of the pages that's available as part of the AP Manager role. When upgrading to JDE Apps 9.2 or 9.2.1, just be aware that in order to utilize UX1, you'll definitely need the tools release in 9.2.1. And you can install 9.2.1 tools release on JDE Apps 9.0 or 9.1, but you wouldn't be able to utilize any of that pre-delivered content. You'll have to build all of your own content. And be aware that a lot of the content utilizing UX1 is based on one-view items, such as watch lists or OVR reports. So if you're looking to build new content specifically for one view, then you'll need some sort of OVR foundation or OVR app licenses. If you don't have any of those special one-view licenses, then you can still view all of the OVR content that comes with UX1, as well as perform some of the modifications like updating the queries behind the watch list or OVR reports. And I've got a slide in the appendix section of this PowerPoint, which should help you know what is and what isn't allowed for the OVR content based on the different licensing types. And one additional thing to be aware of is that when you install the pre-delivered UX1 content through these, they're called beta packs, the UX1 role only comes with the role header and the links to the UDO content. And if you're going to utilize all these pre-delivered roles in a proper security model, then you've got a bit of work to do to signal the application security to those pre-delivered roles. I'm already working on getting that role object information in a better format so you can easily do those security workbench updates, and hopefully that'll be available to all of our ManageForce clients soon. In terms of what we'll be demoing, here's our checklist for today. Just some of these topics I'll be breezing through as you're probably familiar with them, but others I'll be going through in much more detail. And the first one we'll be going through is something called Enterprise One Search. And before I go into the system, I just want to show you a screenshot of what that looks like. There's actually two different types of the Enterprise One search. There is one on the top right, which is a search feature on that main toolbar. And there's a E1 page version of that search. So for my demo environment, I've only got the E1 page version available there. I'm not on the latest tools release. So I'll just be demoing that one. Just gonna log in. So that Enterprise One Search E1 page is right here. And it looks very much just like a regular Google search engine. And by default, it comes with 4 categories. One is menu tasks. The other is address book records, inventory items, and work orders. And I'll show you how it works here. You just maybe type in a word like fuel, and it auto searches as you type. And the first one is that task one I mentioned, which in my opinion is long overdue, the ability to find certain items on the menu based on keywords. Then I've got some results for both the address book and the items. And notice for the address book, I got a couple extra buttons for my search results here. The I is additional information. So when I click on it, I can see some additional information like sales orders. And we also have another button to take you to different screens. So if I were to click on here, there's one option to drill into the sales orders for this customer. So if I click on it, it's going to pass in that address number into my screen. I'm just going to go back to my search here and show you the task part again. So once you find the result for something on the menu, you can just click on it and it'll take you into that application. So this functionality here is based on some additional hard management to our servers. So something called the AIS server that needs to be running in order for this to work. And also the task portion is based on something called menu indexing. So it's a new application you'll find under the content development tools right here, build task index. So if you're going to be utilizing UX1 content for this Enterprise One search or the springboards, which I'll describe later, you'll need to build these menu indexes using this application. And what that does is it builds a table for each role and the menu task, so it knows which tasks are available for that role. And that respects both application security as well as menu filtering for that role. Another thing to be aware of is that you might start seeing some new menus under the Enterprise One menus. So if I go under financials, accounts payable, so here you got UX1. You'll start seeing these menus here, which supports the springboards, which I'll show you later. Okay, the next feature I'm going to show you is something called list view grids, which starting in 9.2, the list view grid format was introduced and it coexists with the classic table view format. And basically what the list view grid format enables you to do is stack columns vertically, or if I can say in other words, split a single row of data into multiple rows in the grid. So for this one here, I'm just going to do an example in the address book. So I'll bring in some data in my grid. So what I'm seeing now is the classic table view. But the list view grid format begins just like the regular one. If you click on personalized grids or tools grid formats, notice I have an option here under format type. I can choose list view. Now what it's asked me to do is build a layout. So I'm going to click on this plus button. And you have two choices. You can add the columns just by adding the value only, or both the label and the value. And I'm more preference just adding the data, so I'm just going to add the address number, maybe the alpha name. And here's where you start adding more rows into that view. Clicking on that button there, so maybe I'll add the address line 1 and the city. And I'll pull this over a bit. Maybe the phone number. You also have a bit of data sequencing options, just like the table view, but you don't really have much else after that. So I'm going to save this one so we can see what it looks like. So here's my list view grid format. So I could see that I got my address number, my alpha name, and then the address line 1, city, and the phone number. And just be aware that once you have this list view grid format, notice that the QV search line disappears, but to compensate, there is a search functionality right there. As well as if you're to export this to Excel, you won't get this view here. You would just get that classic table view format. So for this feature here, I'd probably recommend just doing a small survey with your users to see if this grid format is helpful to them, helps them view the information more easily compared to the classic table view. Then from there, going forward and see if that needs to be trained to all your users as part of your basics or navigation course. So I'm just going to get rid of this table view or list view format. I won't need it anymore. Okay, the next feature I want to show you is personal forms. So personal forms is a new feature that allows you to change the look of a form for any given application without needing the assistance from a developer. And it's probably my most favorite feature from the 9.2.1 tools release. So for that one there, I'm just going to go to the voucher entry screen. Click Add. So the process begins by clicking on this button right here in the top right, the personal form button. And there's a lot of different things I can do here. And unfortunately, there's a few things I'm going to describe, but I can't demo just because I'm on just a slightly older version of tools release. But from here, you're able to quickly remove fields or hide fields simply just by taking things off with the minus button. So let's say I don't need the approver. I can just click those. If I ever needed to re-add those, I can just click them back right here. So let me just get rid of this one as well. I can start moving things around, so I can take this column here, move it up. I can rename the fields. I can just say instead of default payment terms, just make it payment terms. I even change the title of the form itself just by double-clicking and changing it there. I can make this a bit bigger and move things down. Notice you could also apply a default grid format. So whatever grid format you want to apply as a default link to this first form, you can do that. A couple things that you can't see here, especially with this example, is you can actually hide entire tabs. So if you're on a screen that has multiple tabs, you can hide entire tabs. You can move fields even between the tabs. So in theory, you can have all the users doing their required data entry without going to multiple tabs, just on the single tab or form. You also change the tab sequence. So what you would see is you see a button called Edit Tab Sequence, and you'll start seeing the numbers for every tab sequence so that you can change how the user can tab through the screen so that it makes sense in a logical order for them. And a couple things you can't do, though, is one, you can't change the labels on the grid. That'd be a separate feature, more likely linked to the grid format feature. So hopefully Oracle will be able to provide that function in the future. So as you can't add labels or fields. Overall, I'd say the main objective of this feature is to make data entry as quick and easy as possible. You can eliminate all the columns that the users have no business seeing or changing, and configure the form so it's very quick for them in terms of the tab sequence and layout. So I'm just going to save this form here. And I can see it directly when I close out of the editor. So notice that some of the things are moved around. I've got some fields missing now. And just be aware that your form is up here in the personal forms. So you can always go back to the default look just by clicking on no personalization. I'm back to where I was. Okay, the next feature is about Cafe One, which stands for Composite Application Framework. And it's a feature that enables users to work with content from multiple sources within the same window. And when I say multiple sources, you can link application forms together either from the same application you're in or other JDE applications, as well as content from external sources like websites, maybe something like Google Maps. I'd say one of the best uses of Cafe One applies when you're trying to eliminate the user from constantly having to drill into a single record, close out, and drill back into the record. I'm going to show you one of the UX1 delivered Cafe One layout samples, which involves the pay approval screen. Let's just get some data here. So notice that when I click on a record, I can see the details for that record on the right hand of my screen here. We split the screen into two. It's the same application, just two different forms from that application. So if you didn't have this, if you wanted to see details, you have to select into each record, close out, approve it, and continue forward. But this way here, you can kind of go row by row, see the details, and then go row approve, for example, and then keep going. So some things to consider when you're working with these layouts here is monitor size and scrolling. So, if you have limited real estate space in your form, or if you have really small monitors, you don't want to make it harder for the users to see the data by breaking the screen into too many different forms. So I'm just going to do an example of my own. I'll show you how to create in Cafe One layout just on your own. For that one, I'm going to go back to the address book here. So I'll bring up my records. Okay, so the process begins by going to the top right here and going to Edit Form Layout. You're going to be asked to pull another piece of content onto the form here. So you have a few choices here. We won't do this OBIE one. We'll just stick with these two. So I'm going to add a form from Enterprise One application. So I'm going to have to drag and drop where I want it. So I'm just going to put it on the right here. When it comes up, it's going to ask you for your application here. So I'm going to do the same application I'm in, which is the address book. And then I can pick the form I want to go into, and I just want to see the details of that address book. So this is the correct one. I have to choose a version. I'm just going to choose the basic JDE version, which is right here. And just be aware that you can also do a personal form. So if I had a personal form here, you could link that personal form that you want to see for this Cafe One layout. And you're going to give it a name just to save it as here. And you can change the description. I just might make it like that. But the key thing you need to do is to provide a link between the main form and the form that you're presenting. So what you do that is choose dynamic link. And you're going to choose the link of the field that you're working with, which in our case is the address number. So I'm going to choose is map to. And you see all the plus signs come up over here. So you have to choose that field you want to link to. So I'm just going to do the address number, obviously, here. And I'll go save. So right now I can see my form automatically updated as I go through the records. I'm still in the editor mode here, so I can just drag and move things over. Let's go over to the right here. So that's how you do the Enterprise One form part of it. Now I want to do something from an external source, so I'll do a URL here. And again, I have to drag and drop where I want it, so I'm just going to put it on the bottom. And in this example, I want to link to the Google Maps here because I want to show my address for the whatever address information I have here. So I'm just going to pull in my link for Google Maps. Paste that in here. Give it a name, maybe call it Gmaps. And again, you have to do a link here. So again, you're going to click on dynamic link. And all the query string pieces from the URL appears here. So I can see the address. By default is right here. I'm going to choose is map to. And again, I have to choose the fields I want to pass in there. So I'm going to choose address line 1 and city. And that's the only ones I could really use here. I'm going to click on save. And it wants to verify the URL here. And one thing to keep in mind is that some browsers may not like this type of feature because essentially these are iframes here. So if you're trying to use other browsers like Chrome or Firefox, you may need to do some browser configuration to get this type of feature working with external content. So if it's going to work here, I'm going to click on my ManageForce Corporation record, see if this will update my map. And there it is. So I can see all my information here. I'm going to save my layout finally and call it MF layout. Okay. I can close out of the editor and just get back to my regular screen here. So now my screen is divided into three parts here. I have the main address book, the details for that record, as well as the Google Maps. Our next topic is about watch lists. And watch list represents the first part of the UX1 alert, analyze, act paradigm. And watch lists have been around for a while, but the concept is to alert users on record counts based on certain conditions. So you got to set up a query first, then you can set up a watch list with thresholds for what you want to be alerted based on that query. So I'm going to go to show you an example. I want to go to the batch header screen. In my example, I want to do a watch list based on how many batches I have in error. So I mentioned the first step is to create a query. So I'll just start that process by going here. And I'll choose batch status. I'm going to say it's batch status E for error. I'm also just going to do it on my user ID. So I'm going to do user ID JDE. I can either type JDE in here, or in some cases I have these session variables available to me. So I can say do the login user ID. And I'm just going to save this here. Call it my queue. And when I close out of here, my query is defaulted up here, and I click find, I'm only going to get batches in error for the JDE user ID. Now, I did that query based on the login ID. However, there's one thing I really wish JDE would provide that's still not available, is the ability to default in the address number for the user ID, because this would work for something like PO approvals or expense management, which aren't necessarily based on user IDs, but based on the address numbers in the table. But I think we'll have to wait for another tools release to have that option available to us. So I got my query here, which is good. And then the next step for the watch list is to click on the watch list button on the application. And I can give a description here, but the critical part is to define the threshold. So I'm going to say 5 lines or 5 counts for my warning, and then say 20 for my critical. You have to choose the query that you want. So it's already defaulted in the one that I created, and I can see the preview of what that query is right at the bottom here. So I can click save, call it my W. Okay. Close out of here. Now I can see the watches up here. It tells me my results right there, 58. But the concept works by how it's out of this application. I can click on that on the watch list toolbar and click on that watch list, and it'll bring me to the application and auto execute the query behind it, which make up all the results based on my watch list. Okay, the watch list could then be embedded in a E1 page, a compose page, and then you'll see it later on a watch list pane as part of the compose page content. Now, something new in 9.2.1 that's related to watch lists is you can create watch lists against data browser, but you'll have to have data browser open to launch them. So you won't be able to launch it from up here. You might be able to see it up here, but it won't actually launch data browser automatically for you. So watch list is part of the OneView foundation there. So the next one I want to talk about, I may not necessarily show much, is about OneView reporting. So a lot of the nice visuals that you'll see in the pre-delivered UX1 content will be OneView reports or analytic components that are based on OneView applications. And I could spend an entire session on doing OneView reports. I may just want to quickly illustrate or remind you the concept of OneView reporting. So with OneView reporting, there's a whole bunch of OneView specific applications. I'm just going to launch one here. I'll do the OneView customer ledger inquiry. And the concept behind the OneView applications is to provide all of the different data columns you could possibly use as part of a report based on a certain topic like customer ledger reporting. And you'll notice there's a OneView button up here. So I'm just going to put a filter on here so it tries to filter on something. But if you have OneView, it'll come with a bunch of pre-delivered reports. So these are some of the pre-delivered reports right here that are published to me, but I also create new reports. But just for sample purposes, I'm just going to run this one here, show you what a OneView report looks like. So what's happening now is the report is generating the data behind the report. So it's executing the query or whatever filters I have on, grabbing all the data required for the report. And then what's going to do is going to launch a BI publisher layout that presents all that data for you. And when you build all those layouts, you have many different options like charts and some tables. So let's just view this one here and see what it looks like. So here I just got one chart here, another chart, and as well as I have some table views where I can still do some filtering if I really wanted to. So that's what OneView reporting looks like. So I'm going to go back to my presentation here and just go over pages, because I kind of talked about that earlier. So in JDE Edwards now, there's you might hear these three different types of pages. You have E1 pages, compose pages, and landing pages. So I want to clarify for you those right now here. The classic E1 pages, they've been around for a while now. They're basically HTML pages that are typically used to allow users to launch applications, reports in a business process flow-like formats. Later on, JDE Edwards introduced the compose pages, which can be used similar to E1 pages, but also allow users to add multiple content types like watch list, E1 applications, or OBI reports. And then the new one here that we were talking about is landing pages. And what those are, they're essentially the compose pages that are already pre-configured for the delivered role. So it's all the content for UX1 that comes in there. So just for simplicity purposes, I'd probably just refer to pages as either being classic or composed. So I'll head back into my JDE Edwards here and just show you what those look like. So this one here is a classic page that I built using E1 Page Generator. So it looks very similar. However, I think the layout is a little bit more nicer here. I think some of the new icons, the backgrounds, and the actual CSS and behind it looks very nice. So you can still do those there. And then I have a few composed pages that come with my demo environment here. So again, they look pretty nice. Let's go through these ones. Here's one with bigger buttons. But now I want to show you some of the ones that's the UX1 composed pages. So I'll go to this AP Manager page. So I talked about that alert, analyze, and act paradigm. So on the left here is all the alert stuff, which is the watch list pane. And in the middle, I have a few different analytic components, which I'll describe later. This is the analyze section. And on the right here is the springboard, which I'll also just show you very quickly as well. So notice that I have these pages on my top here, and this one here in particular has a little circle on it, and that tells me it's a personal page I developed, and while the other ones are ones that were published to me. But let me talk about this springboard functionality here. So the springboard represents that act portion of the paradigm. It's essentially a reference to a parent menu task that displays its child menu items. So later when I build a brand new compose page, that's a UX1 type looking page, I'll show you to add that springboard here. And the use of springboards appears to compete with E1 pages and favorites. It's really just launching applications. And for me, the concept is very similar to the carousel. So I'll just show you that quickly here. If I click on Supplier Ledger Inquiry, it's going to launch the app in the window. I can keep my springboard here at the bottom. And just like the carousel, I can kind of drag and drop to where I want it to be. Drag it all the way to the left. I'll just keep it on the bottom here. You also hide it just like the carousel. And just a reminder I mentioned earlier, if you want to utilize these springboards, you'll have to have the menu and indexing functionality run, just so that the springboard has something to refer to. So next now, I want to talk about all these kind of fancy visuals here. So a lot of these applications are based on some new development, which I'll just get into right now here in my presentation. So some of these new terms you'll have to kind of be familiar with is ADF and JET. So most of the analytic components that you see that we're just seeing right there, they're mostly these ADF applications. I'd say like 99% of those are these ADF applications versus these JET applications. So ADF stands for Application Developed Framework, and it requires an Oracle Web App Server with something called ADF Runtime, as well as the AIS server I mentioned kind of previously for the Enterprise OneSearch. And all these applications are developed in Java JDeveloper software. And for ADF applications, if you were to build them, you're going to do it in JDeveloper and then upload these jar files to the Oracle Web App Server. And for the JET applications, which is this JavaScript extension toolkit, it does require a special JET development environment as well to download, but these ones are uploaded into JDE as these classic E1 pages, so essentially zip files. So before we get into the system, I'll just show you some samples of what these ADF applications look like. So this one here is the one I have in my system right now. This is a org chart that's very nice to display here. This one here is a kind of a calendar view. It's called the Work Center Load Review application. It's on the menu. You can launch. This one here is a kind of a staff utilization type of look here with the calendar as well. And this one here is a property map. So kind of similar to my Cafe One layout where I build something to link data to then look at something on the map. But this one here is a bit more nicer. And in this example here, it's being linked to some companies and real estate data to see where it is physically on the map. So I'm going to try to show you that org chart one specifically, what it looks like. It's going to be a bit slow on my machine here, but I'm going to put an address number in here, 7500, and click on refresh. So there's some options here. It's a little bit small, but I'm just going to change the view here. You have a control panel options. And here I can zoom to fit. I can zoom in, zoom out. This one here is to the layout. So I can say, okay, this one's from top to bottom right now, but I can go left to right or in this other format. Let me just try this one here, radial. And I'll just zoom in here. Maybe I'll see the nice pictures that they show in the sample. Okay, and also with the actual bubbles itself here is I can hover over and see more information, as well as I can go through additional information based on here just scrolling through. So I have both the contact, the location information, as well as organization. And I can also drill into the actual employee. So if I click on the bubble itself, it'll take me into the employee information for that address number. So I'm going to go through all the different parts of the UX1 content, those compose pages that alert, analyze, and act paradigms. So I'm going to show you how to just build one from scratch here. So I'm just going to get back to my home page. And the process starts by going to the top right and choosing under Manage Content, the Compose Pages link. And I have to start adding some content here. So all these different options here, I'm not going to go through all of them specifically, but the designer pane is kind of like building your own E1 page where you can launch applications reports through tasks or application objects. You add one-view reports, you get embedded an application within the page, you can embed a classic human page in there, as well as URLs or these ADF applications. But the three ones you want to be aware of is the watch list pane, which is the first one. Then your middle ones could be the one-view reports or these Enterprise One applications or these ADF ones. Then you're going to add the springboard. So I'm going to take this watch list pane and I'm going to give it a name. So I'll just call it My Watch. You can add a description. You can either add all the watch lists that are available to you, or I'm just going to start with an empty one here just to show you how to add things manually. So I'm going to click OK. And if I want to add a watch list here, I'll just click on the plus button. And these are the ones that are available to me. So I'm just going to choose the one I created earlier, which is my W. And that's the only one I need. So next one, I'm going to start adding some analytic stuff. So that one's the actual Enterprise One application that was developed through ADF though. So when you click on it, you're going to have to drag and drop where it wants to be. So I'm just going to put it on the right. It's going to ask you for an application name, which I already have prepared here. It's one of these one-view analytic components. So I'm going to paste that in there. And there's different views of it. So I'm just going to do open vouchers by suppliers, a sample. There's no versions. Keep everything the same. I'll let that load. So that's part 2 of 3 now. And then the last one, I'm going to add a springboard pane. So I'll just take this one and again drag and drop it. Put it to the right here. And choose the menu tasks. So I want to pre-ready to go. So I'll just call this one My Spring. And you would have to put a parent task. So this is like a menu item. You can do a search for it. I'll just put the one I'm going to be using here. Okay. Now it's going to start populating all those menu items that are part of that parent menu task. At this point here, I'm still in the editor, so I can kind of drag and drop things to where I want it to be. So I'm just going to move this here. So I get more of my analyzed nice charts. And maybe move this over to the right here, just to keep in a kind of a single layout. And when I'm ready to save it, I'll just go save here and call it my UX. And close out of here. So you can see it for in its final format. There's my UX1 page, my alert, analyze, connect, and I can start doing how I want it. I can kind of choose different queries within here. Okay, apply. So that's what I wanted to show in terms of as a demo here, but I still have some additional slides I want to go through in terms of some my own personal recommendations on UX1. So if I were to summarize all the features that we kind of went through and based on their potential in terms of low, medium, high, I would rank the personal forms, which I mentioned my favorite, as well as the Enterprise One Search and the classic E1 pages is probably the highest one or the highest value you can provide to your users in terms of personalization, functionality, and usability. So anytime I do E1 pages for our clients, they're always very happy to use them. They're probably one of the favorite things I enjoy doing, implementing. I also mentioned the Cafe One stuff. So I think Cafe One can be very useful depending on the conditions. I don't think it needs to be used to excess, but it can be very handy in those situations where you're constantly drilling in or trying to see information, many different types of information at once without scrolling through or launching many applications or going to different browsers, that type of thing. The analytics, it's all been dependent on if it's useful to you as an organization, if it provides relevant information to you, if it helps you to make effective business decisions. So that's going to be depending on the modules you use, the content pre-delivered from UX1, and whether those charts actually provide anything specifically to you. On the low end of the scales, I don't really think springboards and the list view grid formats are revolutionary at all. I think they compete with other stuff in functionality. So it's really, if you find them useful, they're useful to you. And the watch list and one view report, that all depends on whether you find the information useful or if that tool is available to you. I personally find one view reports a bit frustrating sometimes because you're limited to the data that you have on the application there. And the watch list there, I'm still waiting for that functionality so I can build kind of a dashboard for my clients to say, okay, this is my page and my address number to get all my PO approvals that I'm waiting for, or my orders based on my originating number, that type of thing. And some other recommendations here, I recommend becoming very familiar with Advanced Query. I'm always surprised that many people have this functionality based on their tools release, but are unaware how to use it, or that it is there. And just as a reminder, the Advanced Query is utilized by a lot of the components like watch lists, one view reports that are feeding into the UX1 content. In terms of list view grid formats, I kind of mentioned there, it's I think it's going to be limited impact on the user friendliness, but it is good something to run by users, see if it is handy, and you want to integrate that into your basic navigation course. And how much you train users on that is dependent on how useful you think this feature is. In my opinion, I would say just do minimal training on it and stick with the classic table view as the main source for showing users how to customize their grids. For Cafe One, I would recommend just starting small and deploying some of these layouts to end users, either by the role or just at start public, and focus on those applications that we kind of went through where you're trying to avoid drilling down and drilling out back into the application there. So start with those high impacting applications, and as a reminder, be aware of your monitor size. It can be a handy tool to have the screen split up in many different forms. If it's too small or you have to keep scrolling, it's not really user friendly. So maybe also consider training some select end users on how to use. Maybe don't be trying to train everybody on how to use this feature, as it is a bit advanced. You kind of need to know the tables and the links and all and forms and all the components of JDE Edwards. And then from there, branching out and see if you can develop more Cafe One layouts that are useful to your business. If you were to ask me which ones are better for launching applications or reports from a E1 page, I'd probably recommend just sticking with the classic E1 pages versus the Compose ones, simply because I feel that they load quicker than the Compose pages, as well as they look much nicer, and and there's more freedom to do what you're looking for. So one thing that I always like to do is add training links at the bottom of my e-learning page, just so that if you have your e-learning page designed nicely with all the applications, they're looking for specific help, they can just launch some additional links at the bottom of the e-learning page. But just note for the classic e-learning pages is you either need to be an HTML guru or know how to use that e-learning page generator utility very well. These are some questions here. They're more self-reflecting or the rhetorical questions, but these are some questions to ask yourself as you're trying to roll out UX1, any of the features here. Number one is, how much training do you need to provide to your users to utilize these features here? So you can enable all these features here, but a lot of the times users will know what it's for, how to use it. So in training and how much training you provide to your end users is something very key to start utilizing all these features here. The next question is really about content long term. So imagine you had 1,000 users, and of course users or employees leave the organization. So if they develop UDO content and you disable the user ID, well, that content is still in JDE Edwards. So what do you do with that UDO content over the years for employees who are no longer there? You either have to purge it or republish it out to whoever takes over, that type of thing. One important one I want to make aware, I mentioned the personal forums is my favorite, but there's one thing to be aware of for that is that if you're supporting users and everyone's customizing or personalizing their pages, when they send in incidents, they're saying they have a problem with the screen, that screen always looks different for every user. It becomes, kind of an issue to support users and know what exactly the problem is, if they're renaming labels, hiding fields, that type of thing. So just be cautious on how much you allow people to personalize their forms, just for that one consideration. In terms of technical there, just a lot of the content and the pre-delivered content is, it may be heavy hitting on your performance for your database. There are a lot of those charts there are maybe grabbing a lot of information by default just by going to the page. Just be consider that, these watch lists and these analytic components, make sure they're not a big drain on your server there for performance. And also, I talked about all those new fancy charts and all that. That's a lot of those are developed in the ADF or JETS environment. So if your JDE developers are trained well in the RDA and SDA tools, you may want to consider training on the actual ADF and JETS piece of the development if you're going to start developing new content for yourself. And I think that what JDE Edwards meant for that is that you can take a lot of the examples, you can download off Oracle support, and once you have those examples downloaded, you can refer to those as examples and maybe copy that and modify it to your own requirements, or at least you have something to refer to in terms of developing these new applications. If you're to look towards upgrading to 921 to get utilized from this UX1, these are some next steps that I'd recommend for you to do. Is number one is, probably the most important one, is actually determine if that UX1 pre-delivered content is useful for organization. It may all look fancy and all that, but it's not useful to your business areas or anything. It may not be worth putting so much effort in using that pre-delivered content. And also, I mentioned the licensing thing for OneView. So if you want to expand your use of watch lists and OneView reporting, and if you don't have those licensing, you may need to adjust your licensing for the OBR licensing as required. And the final two is about how you strategically roll them out here. All these features is you want to have a strategy for deploying things at public. So grid formats, queries, personal forms. Figure out what needs to be applicable to all users and start with that content and deploy it out, and then start working on enabling the features so users can be trained on either developing their own Cafe One layouts. Also, you have to update security on that so that they have access to those features. So build from a base, I would say, and then expand from there to allow users to start utilizing these personalization features. So that's the end of our presentation here. I want to thank you for your time in listening to this webinar. And again, if you have any questions or would like to schedule some time to speak with us, then please email us at info@manageforce.com.